Hi John, this is your feedback video for discussion board 1, re-recorded. Sorry I couldn't find the link or the videos. You don't need to worry about, but my phone had max capacity, so when I uploaded them I deleted everything. Apparently didn't upload yours. So my sincerest apologies. I will put an extra effort to keep you on track or get you back on track. So don't worry about that. All right, so let's talk about your research questions here. If you haven't watched the other video, stop this one. Go watch the other video. That's really important, the general all-around feedback to frame and set up this video. So it was important that you had kind of a blank slate to think about what interests you, where your research passions are, where your curiosity is. Now this is about reality. So this is about how are we going to get this done? I'm on your side. You and I are going to problem solve to create a research project that you can do in this semester, with a few weeks of data collection. Some of the limits, which I mentioned in the other video, but hadn't mentioned before, are so you can really only survey adults, and you need to have access to carry out these surveys. So adult opinion, adult behavior, if you will, adult attitudes. So I'm trying to pick out some of your interest areas here. First of all, so research question, we'll go through one at a time. And again, we're looking for 12, 15, 20 people max. If you can think of surveys, or even if it's not a survey, if you had, like if you're doing something on your, if you're assessing students' performance, you would create a separate page for each student. And even though they're not filling it out, because they're not allowed to fill it out, or be participants in the study, that takes IRB approval, and that's more complicated than we have time for. If you're assessing them, you would just fill out like a little, it'd be like a questionnaire or an instrument where does the student behave this way? Are the students' grades this way? Are they acting this way? Based on this role play, based on this attitude towards history. And you just have 20 different or 15 different sheets or data points, and then you would analyze those and compare those. Hope that makes sense. So question number 1, really, so I see you're definitely interested in the history role play. I'm assuming you're a social studies or history teacher, which is, so let's assume that, and you have access to tap into this sort of thing. So either in your classes or with your other history teacher friends. So question number 1, to me, would be better phrased, what activities increase student engagement, or are the most engaging, or engage students the most in learning history? And sorry, let me come back to so if you're not a history teacher, you don't have access to these, that you need to figure out how you're going to get this information. That's your next process before sending me back a second version. None of these topics we can rule out, but when it comes to measuring student engagement, you can't measure directly from the students unless you're the teacher and you're going to make those assessments kind of third party. So tying this back in, so research question 1, it really looks like what increases student engagement levels. And then what your hypothesis can be, historical role play based activities increase student engagement. What activities are the most engaging? So now sub-question 1. So do you mean what type of historic role play activities? Or do you mean what other type of activities? These are things you want to think about, right? You don't have to answer each individual question. I'm just kind of prompting you back when I see this. So are you further clarifying what type of activities in historical role play? I don't know anything about historical role play, so you know better than I if that's project-based, or if they make maps, or if they act out scenarios. I'm not going to keep guessing. But maybe you'd compare 2 or 3 different activities over a 3-week period. If you're collecting data, week 1, we do this type of historical role play activity. Week 2, it's this way. Week 3, it's this way. Maybe it's scripted. Maybe they write the scripts. Maybe they, again, however those vary. So I'm going to assume that you mean, in sub-question number 1, what type of historic role play activities are you... Yes, honey, just keep watching the movie. Sorry, John. I'm doing this at an inopportune time so I can get it back to you sooner, so you don't have to wait any longer for the feedback. All right. How do student attitudes... So you have to think about how you're going to measure engagement. If this question number one is clearly about engagement, so how are you measuring engagement? Are you, as the teacher, going to, at the end of every class period, for a 2-week period, indicate on a scale of 1 to 5 how engaged you thought the students were? Or out of 25 students, how many were engaged? Highly engaged, partially engaged, not engaged at all? Do you have behavior measures? Is it that significant where you're going to talk about how many times you had to send someone in the office during history class and hope that this improves behavior level because engagement competes with behavior, disruptive behavior? So you got to think about designing your questionnaire and your instrument. I don't need to see that now, but you need to have a sense of how you're going to measure engagement, if that's possible, because you cannot ask the students were you engaged. So think about that, what that looks like on task, off task. How do attitudes towards the study of history affect engagement levels? So you're not really able to talk to them about their attitudes. So that would be a challenge unless you're assessing that third party, or unless it's part of your classroom. This is what you're already doing, is you have student attitude towards history and you're measuring this as you're in your history department. I don't know. But that's a tough variable to get student attitudes without asking them. Does student choice on historical persona affect engagement levels in history? So that feels like a sub-question about the role play. So maybe sub-questions 1 and 3 are clarifying about this role play activity. So maybe research question 1 is about how does historical role play based activities impact student engagement within the classroom? And then does it matter what type of historical role play activities are the most engaging? Does the choice of historical persona impact student engagement? And then maybe 1 or 2 more about that. Does the length of the activity, are boys and girls more engaged in historical role play activity? Measures like that. And anything else that your research, or that when you get your lit review, you'd be free to adjust some of those. So it's sub-question number 2 is really the biggest problem with the attitudes. So you'd want to replace that with a couple of those other suggestions, or just reflect more. So this, again, I'm assuming you as a teacher would do this, would get this information on your class. So the problem there is that you're the only one, will only have a sample of 1 class. If you have 6 periods, that's helpful. Or 4 to 5 or 6 periods of history, that's helpful. I don't know if you have your history teacher peers, or how many would be able to complete this, and maybe they're doing it. Maybe they're doing historical role play activities. Maybe they're not. And maybe you're comparing the engagement of your kids to their kids. Even though they will assess the engagement, you will assess the engagement. The validity is not publishable, but that's not the point. So maybe more than your 4 classes. You probably would want to do more than your 4 classes, though. And maybe the other classes don't do role play, or maybe they do. Either way, I think we can work with that. So that's just some things to think about, if that's the question you go with. And after you get this feedback, you're going to decide question 1, 2, or 3, or maybe you're still torn on 2 of them, and you want to revamp them, rewrite them, clean them up, and then we can go back and forth again. All right, question number 2, do historical role-play-based activities have a positive or negative effect on students' opinions of history? So we have self-identification. This is all about student opinion. I would probably say that you can't do this question unless you're already measuring it, unless you already have measures of students' opinions on history. or unless that's part of the curriculum, and you can just basically peek in the grade book to get this data, peek through their assignments. If they take a survey after every unit about how much they like history, that's fine. But if that's part of the research, it's not something you're going to be able to do. Again, if you're surveying 10, 15 history teachers about, in your class, do you feel like students' self-identification impact their opinion of history? Yes or no? Do you feel like, and then you're going to get surveys back from 15 history teachers that answer questions 1, 2, and 3, and maybe 4 and 5, or again, come back to that boy-girl comparison. Maybe it's an income-based or size of the class-based. Put in some of those other factors. All right, and then question number 3, is there a difference in motivation between students' engagement in online historical role play and in classroom only historical role play scenario? Okay, so motivation is challenging to measure if you don't measure directly from the student. You would, as a teacher, kind of secondhand observation is based on engagement. I mean, motivation is not the only thing that impacts engagement, but motivation, if you don't directly survey how much do you want to be successful, how interested are you in it, that's really a direct, I feel like that's a direct measure. Unless you're asking parents to assess their students' motivation, again, motivation's kind of slippery. I do like the idea here of this online, that sounds certainly interesting to me, the online versus the in-class. So maybe that pops up to research problem number 1, and maybe that's one of your new sub-questions up there. What type of activities are most engaging? The ones the in-class ones. And then, hey, how about comparing in-class to online, which is more engaging? I like this question again about if they self-identify as a gamer, or what type of online activities. So if you look at research question number 3 and get away from motivation, come back to engagement. Let's assume that we can measure engagement. You're going to measure engagement in a certain way. But I would also say you can measure achievement based on that unit test, Unit 6, Unit 7, Unit 8, whatever. You're also free to use your grade book as an outcome measure, and you should probably measure both. It's good to get engagement and how they're performing. But motivation seems to be a challenge. I see as a challenge, as a problem area. If you take research question number 3 and put engagement in there, is there a difference in engagement between, well, online or historical role play or in classroom? Then you can look at number of participants. You can look at, it's hard to see if they self-identify as a gamer or not. I think it would be approvable if at the beginning of your class you said, all right, there's 25 of you in here, raise your hand if you consider yourself a gamer. And 7 people raised their hand and the rest didn't. Then you'd have a sense of 25% of the class identify as gamers and it impacts, versus in your 6th period you have 80% of your class identify as gamers. Let's see how they did. That, you can do a straw poll like that where you raise your hand. That doesn't require IRB approval under the context we're talking about. So for me, I see you taking research questions 1 and 3 and rehashing some of the factors that you're interested in, considering some of the measurement and sampling issues that I raised here. Think about that. Put it back in a table like this. In the best of cases, the table only has 1 line. Research problem in a box, hypothesis, null hypothesis, and then 3 to 5 sub-questions that you kind of rehash. Email it back to me. I'll look at that. Maybe we can wordsmith or rephrase some things. If necessary, I'll send you my phone number. We'll set up a phone call just to be more efficient and get you on path. Hope you're having a great day. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about this. When you email back this table, your second draft, feel free to type in the email, yes, I am a history teacher. This is how many periods I have. This is how many history teacher friends I have. Feel free to divulge some of your rationale that doesn't fit in the box, but that I can better understand what you're thinking. All right, thanks.